On the show today, we've got Jamie Mercadante, and the topic is dating and sobriety. Jamie is now 11 years sober, and we'll learn more about her story, what it was like getting sober, and how that impacted all her relationships with herself, her family, friends, and romantic partners. Then, because this is Flirtations, we've got sober dating strategies and tips to navigate a dating landscape that, let's be real, y'all, can revolve a lot around some drinking. And I mean, for sure that, and sometimes other drugs too. So let's go, flirties. Let's do this and meet Jamie.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Welcome to this episode of Flirtations. I am thrilled to have Jamie Mercadante on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you.
To Flirtations. Yes. This is going to be such an incredible conversation, as we were chatting a little bit beforehand, on sobriety, relationships, dating, and also it's the relationship you have to yourself. It's been very interesting to me to see some of these big themes that have come out of the first several episodes. And one of those is the relationship to the self. So I'm very excited to get into that with you today. I want to also share at the top here how we first met, because I know you personally, and you came into my life a few years ago. I had just moved to Greensboro, North Carolina from Virginia Beach in a big phase of transition, quit my job, moved back home, starting my coaching business. What am I going to do? I'm so confused, feeling quite lost. And first thing I do, right, I look up what's the nearest yoga studio. It's Radiance, first class, Sunday, 4 p.m., hot flow. And I took your class and I immediately felt so much better.
Right.
I did.
I know. That's so funny that you just said that you're from Virginia Beach and you moved to Greensboro, because I'm from Newport News and I moved to High Point. Yeah, I'm from Newport News, Virginia.
I never knew that.
Born and raised.
That's so crazy. Right there in the Tidewater. You're a peninsula. Peninsula resident.
Yes, I am a official bad news girl.
That's so wild. Deepening the connection right here on the show. All right. All right. Please tell the flirties more about yourself, who you are, and your journey of sobriety. That's what we'll be talking about today on the show.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm in my early 40s now. I moved to North Carolina from Newport News the summer of my senior year of high school because of the craziness that I was doing in Virginia. So that was pretty much like the beginning of it all. Where I grew up in the neighborhood, there was nothing like it. I mean, there were so many kids my age. We all grew up together. I mean, everyone was either on drugs or drinking alcohol or selling drugs or, I mean, it was like, that movie Kids that came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was we sat and watched and we were like, oh my God, this is our life. It was like through and through our life. And I knew that if I did not move to North Carolina, which is where my mom's from, so I had family here, I knew that I would either be dead or be like a high school dropout. There was no chance. There was no chance of me amounting to really anything if I stayed there. So I moved to North Carolina. And yeah, I behaved for a while. And I've shared before with someone, like I didn't drink until I turned 21.
Mm-hmm.
So I did all the other things until I
Yeah.
turned 21. So it was kind of like off to the races once I started drinking. And it was just a wild ride. And I finally got sober July 7th, 2013. So I'll
Wow.
have 11 years this July.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah. And we're recording this in June. So when this episode drops, hitting 11 years.
11 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so when you moved to North Carolina, what were some of those first experiences like, and some of those initial changes that maybe you were able to make?
Um, I felt very out of place here.
Hmm.
Um, I worked a lot. Like I had 2 after school jobs. I actually repeated my 11th grade year. So it wouldn't be so much of like a hectic deal my senior year with moving here. So I repeated 11th grade. And then I graduated and I became a mom very early.
Hmm.
But it was just very, I mean, to be honest, I was just a very angry person and I was very uncomfortable. There were situations, and I would never say that I was like a victim,
Mm-hmm.
but like the experiences that I had, it hardened me so much.
Yeah.
I got pregnant very young, and by the time I was 25, I had 3 children. I
Mm.
had been married,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I was just very unsettled, but everything on the outside looked great.
Mm.
So it looked great that I worked at the hospital. It looked great how my house looked.
Mm-hmm.
Like I tried to keep myself up as much as like everything was like picture perfect, but it
Yeah.
was just like chaos and just turmoil, like deep within. And even
Yeah.
like with how I was living. Um, but after I got divorced, I would go back and forth from North Carolina to Virginia. And I did that
Mm-hmm.
for years. So whenever
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have my kids,
Mm-hmm.
I would hightail it to Virginia
Mm-hmm.
and just relive everything that I was doing, that made me move to North Carolina. So it was
Right.
just like craziness for 5 days. And then I would come home and I would work these crazy hours at the hospital and I would take care of my kids and everything was great. And then once they would, you know, go to
Mm-hmm.
their dad's for visitation, I would go straight back. So I was able to hide a lot of
Yeah.
my drinking. I was able to
Yeah.
hide a lot of my drug use, and a lot of my pain.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I can relate to a lot of your story already. And another theme that's come up on flirtations is this process of running in many ways, where we're running from something. And so I'm very curious to learn more about, because we'll get into how you found and got into yoga as we move forward, because there's the concept of duality, which is always so interesting to me. And so you touched on it, where it's on the outside looking in, picture perfect, everything seems wonderful, but inside there's that turmoil. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Specifically with like how I was feeling and like
Hmm.
the emotions behind it.
Yeah.
What drove me, and I did not know this until months after I was clean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm talking like 6 to 9 months after I was clean. Fear. Like fear drove
Yeah.
everything. So it was like, of course, like, PTSD and trauma and situations, and I'm not saying those light at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, yes, of course we have things happen and we experience things, and that's what helps drive us.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like deep down, what really brings up the reactions,
Mm-hmm.
brings up the like with our nervous system, with like being in fight or flight,
Yeah.
just that like even like the autopilot, like the day-to-day stuff that we do, there is like a embedded like emotion feeling that is there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, looking back, it was fear. I did a lot of running. I did a lot of self-sabotaging, like a lot.
Yeah.
If I knew that someone was going to hurt my feelings,
Mm-hmm.
then I would do something, or completely, like, in that word ghosted wasn't even like a thing, but I would
Mm.
ghost people all the time.
Yeah.
But I would have it be that on the outside, like, I didn't care about anything. I didn't need you. I didn't care about you. Like,
Uh-huh.
I'm this tough girl. Like, nobody's going to mess with me. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to do what I want to do. Um, but it was all, of course, like during that time, I was like, yes, this is how I am. But looking back, it was so much of a facade.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely understand what you're sharing, what you're saying, and it's that the fear and where it may come from, where it may originate, if it's in childhood from trauma, PTSD, just perhaps something that happened in your life that didn't seem that consequential. It's like what we know from it's like the body stores these feelings and these emotions, but the duality of it, the beauty of it, is we also get to store the good things and the good emotions too. And once we start to work through that conditioning, it can really change our lives. Sort of whatever practices you bring into your life to start working through some of that conditioning and fear. I'd love to hear more now about what started to happen when you did become sober and start to work through that fear without some of the habits, right? That
Gosh.
we've been going to. I know.
Right. I remember, like, because early on in sobriety, I would say like the first 2 years, I
Mm-hmm.
went to meetings, and we can touch on that later.
Mm-hmm.
I went to meetings, and I remember very early on, um, like a meeting would be over, and there was one time I was like looking at my sponsor, and she was like, we were outside smoking our cigarettes, and she was like, all right, like, I'm leaving. Have a good night. And I'm just like bawling, like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what do I do now? I mean, I had to, and this is like no like exaggeration, I had to learn how to live. Like the autopilot stuff with like
Mm-hmm.
work. Yeah. I mean, I worked at two places,
Mm-hmm.
like until I became a yoga teacher. Like that was nothing. Like taking care of like my kids, it was like nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just, but for me to like even connect with people, to have even like different like thought processes
Mm-hmm.
of like how to go about my day to day with myself, if that
Mm.
makes sense. And
Yeah. Yeah.
takes me back to, and it's like certain points of like, having all this clean time, there's certain points that really stick out to me. And there was one, and I was walking in the neighborhood with my mom, and she was like, didn't you just like seem like so out of it with like the things that you were doing and just like so uncomfortable and I was like, no. I was like, now I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I am so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's just like that, those like bumper sticker sayings that you hear in like recovery, like one day at a time. And it's so true. It's like you have to go through those same experiences that you went through whenever you were using and new experiences. And like you hear like, oh, my first, with me being sober, my first with me being so, and it was like a lot of those for like a really long time.
Yeah.
But it's just like with anything, you just go through it.
You do.
Feel it.
Feel it, notice.
Feel it.
As you say, in your classes, to notice.
Yes.
I'd love to hear now about when yoga became a part of your story.
Oh my gosh. I had two friends at the time in recovery, and they took me to a yoga class at the YMCA here in High Point. And I weighed a little over 100 pounds. I remember like trying it and like doing the thing like with down dog, how like you keep looking up and you keep looking up and like my wrists were hurting, like everything hurt.
Yeah.
But I was intrigued by it because I've always moved my body, exercised, ran, walked, like did workout tapes, like even as like in a young age, I've always been super active. So it wasn't like, I've never exercised before, so I'm going to try that. No, I was just like, okay, this is cool. Like, cause I mean, I was like, just lead the way, especially in early, just lead the way, a yoga class. Okay. Like, is that going to be good for me? Like, okay. And I kept going. And I remember like, I would hurt myself so much because my body was so tight and so fragile and just unhealthy. But I just kept going back and it just clicked.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious now because you one day at a time, very much true, but keep going back, you kept going back. How did you know that this was something to keep going back to? Was there was it about maybe intuition or just a curiosity, a combination? What was it?
I think that it was the way that I was learning to connect to myself. Like it was mine.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, and of course it's like you hear things from your teacher in a class and they'll say it like 100 times, but it's like that one time you'll hear it. So it was like kind of like stepping stones in front of me. And I've always said this whenever I would teach class, like yoga is like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yeah.
Like you think that you're somewhere with it, and it could be physically, it could be mentally, it could be spiritually, it could be how, really like whatever that focus is or that what you're witnessing to, but it's you think that you're at this spot, but then it's like another lesson or another realization of something about yourself. So it just keeps having you like revisit and continue to learn and notice more and more like within. And I know that sounds like so like, typical, but it's so true.
Yeah, it's true.
It's so true. And with yoga, I feel like people, they tend to stumble into a class. And a lot of times it's because of some sort of suffering.
Mm,
And it doesn't have to be super negative. It doesn't have to be this like traumatic, like life-changing event but there is something inside you
hmm
because you know that it's different than any other thing that you're doing physically. Even if you don't think it is, in the back of your mind, you know that
Yeah.
there's something different.
hmm
You don't like, you can't put your finger on it. Like you're going to see what happens. Let's see what this, studio's all about, or, this class is all about.
Yeah.
But if you keep showing up to it,
hmm Yeah.
that's where like the change is. And that's just kind of like what kind of like grab hold of me, especially
Yeah.
during that time in my life. I needed to change everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, why not have yoga be, my teacher
hmm
with like showing me everything
hmm
that I needed to change and that, I needed to kind of like keep.
Yeah. No, it is true what you said. It really is the same for me, different than anything else I've tried. And it was just this like it was a curiosity. Sometimes it was a little bit of this resentment and sort of like I just want to be good at this thing. Sometimes that would drive me. Or you see somebody else and they're doing like, this is so super flexible, so strong. Like, oh, like I wish I could do that. But then here you are on a yoga mat, which isn't that big. And how is it possible that all of these things can be happening? And I'm like, on this, I'm kind of stationary in many ways. I'm moving, but I'm in this fixed space. How can all of these things be happening in a fixed space? And it's so much of it is happening within you. It really is so much a personal teacher and has been a big part of my story and why Flirtations is here. That's like it's a lot of the work I've done in yoga too. All right, so I want to know a little bit now about how your relationships started to shift and change, some of those dynamics once you became sober. I think we've talked a lot about the relationship to the self, and it's gonna keep coming back up, but talking about some of those other relationships in your life now.
Whenever I got sober, situations happened, and everyone that was in my life prior to me getting sober, they were removed.
Okay.
I mean, it was crazy. Like everything that has happened since I decided to be, I mean, it is out of my control.
hmm
And I just follow it. And like all of my best friends from high school, especially in North Carolina, um, they aren't in my life. Like no one like pre-sobriety is no longer in my life really.
Yeah.
Sure, we'll say hi and like we'll see something like on social media and like the love is still there, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like how I was and the things that happened, there was no room. There was no room for those relationships.
Right.
And I had to be patient with my family for them to realize, and time helps with that, that I really was changing. Because for me, how I lived and how I interacted with people, the lack of communication that I had with people, and the sense of really caring. I mean, I had someone say to me, because I finally like spoke up and said something, that was bothering me. And she was like, I had no idea because you really don't care about anything or anyone, because I was so closed off.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was getting sober, to really try to have relationships in my life, it was like a free for all because I didn't really know
Mm.
exactly like to set boundaries. And I became like, like I overextended myself and like, this is what you do. Like
Mm-hmm.
you go out and make plans and, you try to be available all the time. And
Mm.
I was really uncomfortable with that because in
Yeah.
the back of my mind, I was like, am I really this way? Like, am I really this way
Mm.
that likes running around and socializing and
Mm-hmm.
dating? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, no, I'm pretty quiet. Um, but I did have one relationship for the first 5 years of sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was like a first of, I mean, he really taught me how to love another human being.
Mm.
And that was the first time in my life. Not that
Yeah.
there was anything wrong with the person that I was with right before I got sober, because he was
Mm-hmm.
wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I had nothing inside. I
Yeah.
had, excuse me, like nothing to give.
Right.
Um, but with this person that I met in recovery, it was like, changing our lives together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was really hard. It wasn't easy. Um, it was very relatable with one
Mm.
another.
Yeah.
Um, but it helped me break down walls that I've had up for I don't know how long. And
Mm.
he really taught me how to show up for someone else
Mm-hmm.
and to love someone unconditionally. And at the same time, learn how to love myself.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Okay. I have a question now that's coming up because this is, I think, going to be such an important part of the show. I get this question a lot where if you're new to dating or you're out of a long-term relationship and it's like, well, I just feel I don't know that I know what love looks like. I don't know that I know how to love. I don't know that I've, been loved in the way that I think you just described. And so kind of I want to sit with that a little bit and go a little bit deeper and see if we could speak to the person that is, I know, listening about what that experience like of just being open to receiving and learning about love and how you like to be loved, and sort of what that connection was like.
It's, and you hear a lot, and this is just my opinion. And I say this a lot, like everything that I say is through my experience and my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear a lot with recovery, early sobriety, don't date for the first year.
Yeah.
That's silly.
Okay. Okay.
It's so silly to me. Um, there is not, for me, I feel like there is not a time frame of you being ready for love, you being
Mm.
ready for a relationship, because like I felt the same way like 6 years into my sobriety with me meeting my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Like those feelings are still there, regardless if you're sober, if you don't have an addiction,
Mm-hmm.
like it's And that's
Mm.
why it's like we are all the same with that, but very much pinpointing with recovery. You have to know your limits. You
Yeah.
have to set those boundaries for yourself. That relationship that I was in for 5 years with
Mm-hmm.
my recovery, the first 5 years, we are no longer together because he could not stay clean.
Mm.
Like
Okay.
there is no, like, it doesn't matter how much love is there, how much connection, how much you want to help someone,
Yeah.
how much you want to, like, no, no.
Yeah.
And that's where me learning more and more about myself and me finally loving myself, I was
Mm.
like, no one is going to take away my peace, take
Yeah.
away my sobriety. And there was one of my friends, she asked me really over the weekend for her son, who is newly sober, like he's starting to date and he met someone and she had
Mm-hmm.
a glass of wine. And I was like, what?
Mm.
Like, for me, I cannot be with anyone that casually drinks. More power to you if you can drink.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. If you are not, like, if that is not a problem for you, I love it. Like, my family, they drink, like, it's
Yeah.
fine. But for me to have an intimate relationship with someone, the day to day, to really have that unconditional love, that respect, that
Yeah.
openness for me to be, they have to not drink or do anything.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that answer is going to be so, so helpful. And it really is about boundaries and showing yourself what
Right.
what your
I
limits are, and like, hey, this is what is a go and this is what is a no. And in many ways, setting the pace and the tone for how you what that love is going to look like. And
Yep.
that's really, it starts with you. It starts with the connection and the relationship with yourself.
I was very, my husband, he knew everything about me and he knew that I was sober
Hmm.
and we didn't even have to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Like I would never ask someone to not drink to be in a relationship with me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like it was so understood and because he loved me and
Yeah.
how I loved him. He doesn't drink.
Uh-huh.
He's not an alcoholic. He's not an addict, but he doesn't
He
drink.
doesn't drink.
And that's just how he lives
Yeah.
because of me. I
Oh.
know. It's really, he's like
Do
amazing.
you hear that, flirties? And he even comes to yoga classes too.
He comes to yoga, but he doesn't drink because he loves me. And
Mm.
he's like, this is how we live.
Ugh, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. All right, because this is flirtations and we'll be talking
Right.
about dating. We'll be talking about dating. Going back, so the person, the flirty that's listening that is sober or even sober curious, and because I get this question, it's like, how do I put it on my dating profile, or like I'm meeting people in real life and it's so off, you want to go grab a drink kind of thing, and they may be inclined to be like, yes, just agreeing to it.
Right.
But taking away from this conversation, I think the answer would probably be no. So you're sober, you're dating. How can we start to explore this part of the conversation?
I would, because the type of person that I am, and I didn't really date. Um, I really, I was with someone for 5 years and early sobriety, and then there was a chunk of time. And to be honest, I would make dates with
Mm-hmm.
people and then I would cancel at the last
Mm-hmm.
minute. I just wasn't ready. Like I was just like, why am I doing this? Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't ready. Um, but then when it came to Mike, it was just like, yeah, this makes complete sense. And we did dinners, but I am the type of person also, like I take not like, but I do not mind navigating like what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be something like super active, like hiking, or even though I hate, but like something like outside. Coffee.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the typical, I mean, coffee's always great. Like meeting somewhere and going for like a long walk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm such a foodie, so anything as far as like food is concerned, but it's just really kind of like putting it out there like, no, I don't drink,
Yeah.
and really seeing that what the other person is going to do, because you do want them to show up as their true self. So if you
Yes.
see them like across from you and they're like trying to get hammered, you know that this
Mm.
is not going to be a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
But they're like, okay, like you aren't, okay, well, I'll get an iced tea as well. Then you can go on a second date
Mm-hmm.
and then see where that goes. And then like the third date. And then that's where like the communication comes in. I wouldn't suggest putting it all out there
Mm-hmm.
in the very beginning, because you don't know if you're going to make a connection with someone.
Yes.
And you really, I mean, unless you're like that, but you really don't need to,
Yeah.
because for me, yes, recovery is very important, extremely important, in the beginning and as well as like with dating. But it's like you also want to welcome those life experiences,
Mm.
because there is so
True.
much more to life than, and some people will know what I'm saying whenever I say this, than just boxing yourself in
Mm-hmm.
the recovery walls. I
Mm.
mean, it's just like yes, I am a sober woman, but I'm also like a great friend, and I'm also a yoga teacher, and I also
Yeah.
love traveling, and I also love trying new restaurants, and I also love, like,
Yeah.
fill in the blank. Um, but I think that it just welcomes more experiences with someone else that may not be very familiar with someone in recovery. But it's like you
Mm.
really just want to see how they're authentically
Yeah.
going to show up,
Yeah.
instead of it being this huge narrative that's already like the elephant in the room, because it will be like
Yeah.
with putting it all out there, like, hey, I'm an alcoholic, or hey, I'm an addict.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know
Yeah. I totally agree. It's this you want to know how someone is going to show up and let them be in their truth as well. And so to feel like you have to hold back and disclose and not disclose that you're in sobriety is like that can be a part of the initial conversation, but not going into your whole no, like that is where it gets into, I think, a lot of this access to your story. And that is something that is earned over time with consistency
yes.
and communication and building trust and then being vulnerable as well. So it's like once we start to get in kind of that third, fourth date territory, now we're like, okay, this is someone that may be like we're at least exploring some long-term potential here. And now you can start to relate on some of those deeper conversations. But definitely initially, like not feeling like you have to hold back and going back to boundaries that we talked about you get to be the creator of your dating life in many ways. And like I am not sober. I'm flirting with sobriety, which I want to talk about a little bit, but I'm really not a drinker. And so if someone is like, hey, let's meet for a drink because I am dating, or like, let me take you, maybe can we meet for a drink, something like that. Like, oh, could we do mocktails instead? Or offering, how about there's this coffee shop or another place I'd like to try. How do you feel about that? Or I'd be like, oh, I'm not really a drinker, or however you want to phrase it, you get to use the language that feels best for you and how open you want to be, but also not feeling like you have to put yourself in those situations where you might not feel comfortable.
Right.
And so I want to ask a follow-up question here is just about navigating the social situations, when you're out there dating, depending on where someone is in sobriety, or if they like sort of where those limits are for them. It's, can I be in spaces where there's drinking, or is it just like not at all? And so starting to, play in that space a little bit.
I think that it depends on the person.
Yeah.
I think that 100% it is you being honest with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
with what your limits are.
Mm-hmm.
For me, especially the first like year and a half, 2 years, I lived in that AA environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then occasionally with going back to Virginia to visit my family, and that took a minute.
Mm.
There were times that I would go to Virginia to see my family and to try to kind of like, hang out and it would just trigger me, but I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, I'm not ready. But I would never like go to a bar to listen to a band. Like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
Could I do that now? Yes. But early on, no. Like, I was very much like, if there's drinking, and that is like what you do at that particular place, like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
good. I'm not, there's no point of me doing that. Like, why would I?
Right.
But it really made me, I think the more clean time I had and really listened to what worked for me and what didn't, that's where like I became my true self. And like looking back, I'm kind of doing the same things as what I did whenever I was a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
I love alone time. I
Yeah.
love the quiet time. I love one-on-one interactions.
Yes.
I get very overly stimulated with a bunch, like a crowd of people or like a social like gathering. But it took a minute for me to even be okay with that because that's not the norm. Like,
No.
it is like you go out and you go to a bar or you are around like 15 friends and like everyone's on their phones and everyone's talking and it's just so much stimulation. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. But how I am as a person, like I'm not going to do something just to do it.
Right. Yeah. Really being able to reconnect back to yourself in a whole new way. And now so something that's coming up now is you mentioned earlier about the sobriety box. And I want to learn a little bit more about that because I also get this question. It's like, well, if I, like if I don't drink or if I give up drinking or if I give up drugs, whatever it may be, I'm like, what are my options? Like, it's like I feel like I'm not going to have anything to do. Like, yeah,
Right.
like no, no, like that's starting to switch that mindset, and there's limitless potential now. You get to do so many other things that aren't just that, and
Right.
explore life in so many other ways, even during the daytime. There's like doing a
Oh,
nice
yeah.
daytime date, a morning date, a outdoor date, a lunchtime date. Like
Right.
there's so many other hours of the day that you can go on dates, and there's so many other things you can do that are not bar, restaurant, like just involving those things. And so yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about the sobriety box and sort of your take on what I said.
Okay. So hopefully I won't get like too much backlash with this,
Go for it.
but I'm honest. Okay. Um, being in AA, being in an outpatient program early on helped me.
Mm,
I mean, through and through. I mean, I did the steps. I had the sponsor. Everything was in a group, range from people 10 years older than me, 15 years younger than me, like doing silly outings, like
hmm.
going to meetings, getting coffee, like doing the thing.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like just learning how to be during that time. So you do the thing, like you do the thing.
Hmm.
Um, and you meet people that you can relate to. And that's where like a lot of like the first comes in with like first holiday being sober, first date being sober,
Mm,
first birthday being sober, like all the things. And you have that group, you have
hmm.
that like, people to hold you accountable. But then something inside me shifted.
Okay.
And I remember being at um, the neighborhood pool, and one of my friends at the time who I met in recovery, she was like, "Why don't you come to meetings anymore?" She
Mm,
was like, if you stop going to meetings, you're going to end up relapsing.
mhm.
And I said to her, and I meant it with every ounce of my being, I said, I stay sober now so I don't have to go to those meetings.
Mm,
Like, I
yeah.
want to move forward in my life. And AA served me for that time. And anyone that comes to me,
Hmm.
even present day, asking to get sober, I direct them to a meeting, I
Okay.
direct them to an organization that helps, I direct them to a treatment center. Like, absolutely, that's what I did.
Okay.
But I could not talk about my past anymore.
Mm,
I was so ready to move forward in life and to live life and to have those experiences. And for me to really just like make things my own.
yeah.
And I think that that's why yoga, it stayed with me. It stays with me
Yeah.
because it has really, like, from meetings, it's like passing the baton. Like,
Yeah.
yoga, it makes sense. Like, why am I going to ruin my body? Why am I going to not be honest? Why am
Hmm.
I going to conflict harm to others and myself? Why am
Hmm.
I going to not be truthful? Why am I going to, you know, ingest things like alcohol or drugs to
Hmm.
alter my mind so that
Hmm.
I am not like in a conscious state of being like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah. I Yeah, I understand. And it makes even more sense to me now. Just how yoga is so personal for each of us that do it, no matter if you're, a weekly practicer, you pick it up here and there, or daily. It doesn't, it's not, it's
Right.
overall, it's still consistent no matter how. It's just the practice of doing it. And it gets to be a teacher. It gets to be a time we get to be with ourselves, which is so hard. It's like you mentioned earlier that you go to a party and everyone's on their phones or everyone's drinking, and it's like it's detaching, moving away from all of that external, whether it's validation, stimulation, whatever it may be, and coming back and being with yourself. This has been so wonderful. As we start to round out the conversation, I wanted to just ask one more question. And you touched on it here about the person, the flirty listening that may be flirting with, sort of contemplating for themselves a sobriety journey, or maybe they're in and out. I know this is I've been flirting with it for me, or flirting with it for myself for a little while, and I feel like just the synchronicities of the universe, like the writing is on the wall. This is something you need to do. I feel like for me, it's always been weed. Like that has been, oh my gosh, like my best friend every time I was lonely, every time I just couldn't get out of my head. And it's a little bit of this feeling of loss, like I'm having to say bye to this friend that was, I mean, in the long run, but in the moment, and for so many moments, was my best friend. And and I've also felt like this was the only way, was the only way I was able to tap into my creativity, that I was able to feel like myself, right?
Right.
That I was able to let go of the anxieties and just sort of be. But it's not a sustainable, you're not becoming, and you're coming into that state organically, right? Just through yourself. It's through using something.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, am I ready to say goodbye? Like, I know I need to, because I mean, the reason flirtations is happening is because I'm not using. I mean, there would have been no way I could do this, coming off of, a night smoking, or, just not sleeping well, or, oh, I smoked earlier in the day and now I'm trying to do this.
Right.
Absolutely not. Not possible. So leaving some wisdom with the flirties that are sort of, am I ready? I don't know. What should I do? Kind of what that initials, seeking help, support, community, absolutely. But something else that may be kind of a tangible takeaway.
Once you real with yourself
Mm-hmm.
and really call your shit out,
Mm, yeah.
that's when the change,
Mm,
that's when that space is created for change.
yeah.
For me, it's like, and I've said this to people before, if you're having that inner dialogue of having to quit something,
Mm-hmm.
having that inner dialogue of something that you are attached to, having that inner dialogue of it being a quote unquote deal with you even thinking about stopping
Mm,
using something to make yourself feel a certain way, you need to look at that.
yeah.
And you need to honestly get honest with yourself.
Ooh.
And and it
Uh,
is not, I mean,
ooh.
change is not for the weak.
No.
Sobriety is not for the weak.
Mm,
It
no.
is the best but hardest decision I've ever made in my entire life.
Yeah.
But it's like, how fulfilling do you want your life to be?
Mm,
How happy do you want your life to be? Reflect
yeah.
of those like pure conscious experiences and to be fully
Mm,
present.
yeah. To be fully present.
Fully
That's such a
present.
big one. And I think that's going to be really helpful to really be with yourself and listen back through this episode, perhaps. And like what's coming up for me when I think about that is I know, I'm not someone that can use casually. It's all or nothing. It's every day or not at all. And I know that about myself now. I'm not someone that can just, Saturday night on the weekends at a party or something, this will be fun. No, I'm not able to do that.
And with a decision like that, stop comparing.
Yeah. Yes.
Stop comparing yourself to other people, because behind closed doors, you have no idea how they're dealing with it.
You're so right.
They can smoke. They're fine. Oh, she can drink on the weekend. She's fine. You have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because I prettied it up as best as I could until I couldn't.
Until you couldn't. Yeah.
Until I couldn't.
And now here we are recording on Flirtations, broadcasting all over the world. What?
Yeah, it's my first podcast.
Oh my God. This was amazing. Yeah. Thank you for allowing this to be your first.
You're welcome. See, my first. Another first.
So amazing.
First. It doesn't matter how long, you have in sobriety. So because I'm able to keep showing up.
Yeah. Yes. Jamie, how can the Flirties find you? I'll have everything linked in the show notes, of course, but please, if they would like to follow along on your sobriety journey and learn more about you, and you post like all that, it just, I'm like, yes, you're posting. So please, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram. My profile name is Just Call Me James.
Okay.
My closest friends call me James.
Perfect. So. I'll have that linked. And if you're curious about some yoga as well, your YouTube channel.
Yeah, my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Jamie
Some
Mercadante.
videos are up.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me today and with the Flirties.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, Flirties, what do you think? Thank you so much to Jamie for being a part of this episode of Flirtations as we talked about dating and sobriety. No matter how this episode may be finding you today, how you're receiving this information, perhaps deep in your own sobriety journey. Maybe you're flirting with sobriety like me. Maybe you're like, Benjamin, I'm good. I'm going to have a few drinks or something. I'm going to indulge every now and then. Or maybe this episode really got you thinking. This is all a part of the experience of being on Flirtations as a flirty, as a listener, as a guest, as a host, as we learn and discover more about ourselves. And I'm so glad that you were able to check out this episode today. And for more information, for more resources, for different places you can go to for support, if you're curious, you've got some questions, I worked with Jamie after the show, and together we put together a list of resources that is all in the show notes. I hope that will be very useful information for you. All right, Flirties, thank you so much for tuning in. You know all the things, or maybe this is your first episode and you don't. So I'll recap them all for you. The conversation continues on Swell. There's Flirt Talk and Flirtstagram. There's also FlirtTube. So come on over to any and all of those platforms. Rate, review, subscribe, share the show. Please, let's get the word out and spread the Flirt mission that I'm working on here at Flirt Headquarters and that we're working on together all over the world. Everyone needs some BFE, Big Flirt energy is what I say. And with that, I'm going to sign off from here at Flirt Headquarters. Thank you so much to my collaborators, as always, Corey and Joey, and I'll see y'all in the next episode of Flirtations. Until then, happy flirting.